Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Country Education Partnership Professional Development Series. My name is Brendan Ryan. In recognition of First Nation people's spiritual and cultural connection to country, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land. We thank them graciously for their continued hospitality. We acknowledge the continued care of life, land and waters over thousands of generations and recognise the immense sacrifice and suffering that occurred for us to live freely on this country. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the memories, the traditions, the culture and the hope of First Nations people across the nation. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the second session in a four-part series, our winter four-part series. Today's topic that we're going to focus on relates to addressing workload for our school leaders. And before we move into the session, I'm pleased to be able to introduce Jason Whiteley, who's been asked to speak about the role of the CEP board and the roles of the committee members. And Jason is a member of the Committee of Management for CEP. So over to you, Jason.
Thanks, Brendan. Hello and welcome, everyone. I am Jason Whiteley. I'm on the Committee of Management and also a principal of a small rural school. So thanks for joining us tonight. I wanted to talk with you to highlight the crucial role of the Country Education Partnership Committee of Management in shaping the educational landscape of rural communities across Victoria. Our committee is a diverse group with primary and secondary school members representing government and Catholic sectors. Each of us is a principal or works within regional offices and have deep roots in our local communities. We understand the unique challenges that rural schools face, from limited resources to geographical isolation. As committee members, our goal is simple but vital: to advocate for the needs of rural students. We oversee and support the work of CEP's dedicated staff, ensuring that their efforts align with our mission to provide every child, regardless of where they live, with high access to quality education and opportunities for growth. By representing all rural communities, we can speak with a unified voice, amplifying the concerns and aspirations of those we serve. We are committed to fostering partnerships, sharing resources, and driving innovative solutions to bridge the gap between rural and urban education. Your support and engagement with our work are what make these efforts possible. Thank you for your dedication to rural education. Together, let's continue to champion the future of our students and communities. I'll hand over to
Thanks,
Kevin.
Jason.
Back to you, Brendan.
Thank you. Now, as usual, our session today will conclude at 5 o'clock, a 1-hour session. The session is being taped as usual, so you can go back and refer to the recording at a later date. And in fact, all of the sessions that we've held over the last 15 months are available online. If anybody has a question as we go through today's proceedings, please include your question on the chat box, and we will endeavour to respond to those questions today. Otherwise, we'll follow up over the next week or so. And before we finish the session, there is always a survey to have completed, and I would encourage everybody that's online to complete that survey before signing off today. So it's my pleasure now to introduce the Chief Executive Officer of the Country Education Partnership, Mark McLay, who will introduce our guests and facilitate today's session. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Brendan. We're very excited today that the presidents of 4 of the biggest organisations in Victoria in regard to our educational leaders have given up their time to join us today. So we're really excited. What we are going to do is go around to each one by one. And what we're going to ask for is just a couple of minutes briefly about the organisation. But the other thing we'd like to hear from, all these organisations, I'm sure, get principals especially say, you know, what's in it for me? Why would I join? So we're not going to go there today. We're actually going to ask each individual, what do you think is your most important piece of work in your role? I will let you, I'll put them on the spot a bit with that. But so Andrew is president of the VPA, the Victorian Principals Association. Andrew Dalgleish, might pass to you first. Tell us a bit about the organisation and what do you think one of your most important parts of your role is?
Thanks, Mark, and thanks everyone for coming along today. Certainly in my role representing the Victorian Principals Association, covering primary school leaders across the state. We cover from regional to rural to metro to large schools. The three pillars of our work are based around professional learning for leaders. Certainly advocacy is a significant part of our work, and that's one of the reasons why our organisations have come together and partnered over the last couple of years, particularly to drive the work of all school leaders and create a unified voice with government and the department, as well as providing professional support through our member advisors. You know, one of the most significant challenges we are facing at the moment is how we ensure that our voice is heard for educators more strongly with government and also with our Department of Education. You know, it's covering a lot across around workload, the unsustainability of that, but it's also allowing leaders to come together and share, similar to what the CEP does, the work they're doing, the innovation that's occurring in our schools, celebrating the great work, but also sharing the challenges that we face in a safe environment where people can say what is frustrating, can share with colleagues as well. And it's something I'm incredibly proud of being a part of and being able to represent. You know, one of the things when I see the people in the room today, we all have the same wish, and that's great outcomes for our kids, but ensuring that our leaders have the support, the training, and the advocacy to ensure that they can do that work.
Thanks, Andrew. So to Colin Axup, President of VASSP, the same question. Tell us a little bit about VASSP, but also what would you consider your most important role is?
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I'm Colin Axup. I'm the president of the Victorian Association of State Secondary Principals, hence why we always just say VASSP, because it's much easier to say. I think the important thing for us as an organisation representing both principals and assistant principals across all secondary schools in the state is around what we call our three pillars. So we talk about the advocacy and influence that we bring to the role, and that's advocating for school leaders. It's about hopefully influencing decision making. So, for example, we've already started the consultation process with the department about the $400 school saving bonus, and it's about us having a role and bringing our expertise as principals and former principals into the department's decision making. Support and care is our second pillar. It's about providing support and care for our members. I think the support element is one of the most important parts of the association. And Andrew touched on it. It's that concept of we're not the department. When we run our regional meetings, and we have 12 regions throughout the state, it's a group of colleagues, a group of peers getting together. I often, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, refer to them as group therapy sessions. It's a possibility for school leaders to basically get together and share the issues that they're dealing with, and to realise that in fact they're not alone in dealing with those same issues. And finally, learning and growth. So our role about providing professional development, and the professional development could be applying for principal class positions. It's our conference, for example, that we run in August as well. But it's also putting together bespoke personal development for an individual or for leadership teams in schools. Or even most recently, we've been running graduate teacher programs to relieve the pressure and stress off principals. I think the most important element of school leadership is to make sure that we are not only seen but also heard. And we're out there advocating all the time. And for example, Tina and I were at the Legislative Council committee meeting, Parliamentary Committee inquiry into state education today, basically supporting the collective voice of principals and making sure our politicians know what it's like to be a leader of a school. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Colin. It's fantastic. Tina King, President of the Australian Principals Federation. So same question to you, Tina. What do you tell us a little bit about the APF, but also what do you think are the most significant components of your role?
Thanks, Mark. And I like how I'm Tina King, not just Tina. That's what happens when you got two short names. Hello, everyone. Delighted to be here with you. And before I launch in about the APF and myself, can I extend my just my high respect for the work that you do across regional Victoria in terms of not just leading your schools, but being champions for your communities. I've had the privilege of travelling around the state in the last month, engaging with our respective membership base. And not only do I enjoy the warmth and hospitality of our colleagues in regional Victoria, but your passion and unwavering commitment in doing what you do in every day with, you know, reduced resources, limited resources, same challenges. And at the end of the day, whether you're leading 12 kids or 1,200 kids, you have the same roles and responsibilities. And, you know, I take my hat off to you. I have the honour and the privilege of being president of the Victorian branch of the Australian Principals Federation, often confused with the Federal Police, but we're not the Federal Police, we're the APF, and we are the industrial arm, we are the union, so that represents principals and APs. So we're very exclusive in our representation because it means we are uncompromised. It doesn't mean that we don't care about teachers, but if there are issues of dispute, be it an MPB issue or a grievance with the teacher, we get in there and we support school leaders. We are completely apolitical and also we work with the department, but we're independent of the department. The department does not pay my salary or anyone else. We receive no funding from the department, therefore we're not compromised. I'm not saying other organisations are, but in terms of working in that industrial space, I basically have free voice and can challenge. So when the minister gets up there and says teachers are my agenda, which is wonderful, he also needs to say teachers and school leaders are my agenda, because, you know, leaders are not principals, are not teachers with responsibilities. So we work in that, you know, all the things that Colin and Andrew talked about in terms of advocacy and support and influencing government and policy. Absolutely, we work a lot, you know, in that space, but more importantly, we work in relation to the industrial side of things, remuneration, salary, etc., but also conditions and the enterprise bargaining agreement. We do a lot in that space and gearing up for a new agreement as the current one expires next year. We're working hard to liaise with our membership base and principals and APs by and large, because there are some pressure points that need to be corrected as we move into a new industrial phase. So you are the ones that you can call when you need that industrial support.
Thank you, Tina. And that last but certainly not least, person I'm very envious of because his ability to grow a really quality beard. We have Cameron Peverett from PASS. Cameron will tell us what PASS is and also what he sees as the most couple of the most important components of his role. Over to you, Cam.
Thanks, Mark. I'm just so pleased to be in meetings where we're still called PASS, because a lot of times through the department they call us PASS, which is very annoying. Yes, thank you for acknowledging the beard. I think that so PASS, we represent all this principal class officers in specialist settings, so this schools for students with disability. We're in a really fortunate position that that we have been chosen by our members to be members across all of the available specialist schools that we identify. So we identify about 94, I think we map out 96 specialist schools, and we have a member in each and every one of those schools, at least one. We're around about 210 members. So I feel like that in my role, I'm very lucky to be a part of this group of presidents and CEOs in this room, because it's very much a collective force, and I think it's really nice to be able to, that we all bring a different view and a different spin into the roles. And I think that's the nuances that sit within the specialist school space, where we are exclusively, more or less, for students with disabilities. I think that's a nuance that's an important thing to bring to the fore. I think that's also in the department's decision-making policies, all those sorts of things. Our specialist schools tend to be an oversight, or they don't consider the impact of a lot of policy until it's already been announced, which I know happens to all of us to a large extent. But the impact that it has on specialist schools and specialist school leaders is something that's always we're trying to grapple with getting into the room as much as we can before we're heavily impacted. I think it's the role of principal across any type of school you sit in is obviously a really complex one. The only thing that shifts sometimes are the priorities, whether you're able to be in the classroom and teaching, or whether you've got higher volume of well-being or welfare or disability, or schools like mine, I am an active principal still, so that has its own complexity. I've got around 80 students and about 40 odd staff, so that's in itself is a complexity, but it's no different from many others. So thank you for inviting me to this, and I'm pleased to have a bit of a chat with you all about what this means to all of us in this space.
Thank you, Cameron. And lastly, I guess CEP, we consider probably our main two roles. The most important work we do is that advocacy role, that rural voice in the room. And the other part of my job is to get the other four we've heard from today to be aware of that rural voice when we're not there. And I think we've done a wonderful job with that. And you heard the words rural and regional quite often in the talks by the four today. So that's a really important role. And the other component is to give a voice for those school leaders who might be in remote settings or very small schools, who might not get to all the network meetings and other meetings, but there's some amazingly talented and very smart people out there who have ideas and thoughts. And it goes beyond school leaders. Mark, we're going to hear from later, but he's even someone we've chatted to around different things. So, so before we get into a couple of key questions, what people might not know is the 5 organisations here today actually meet regularly once a term to discuss issues, produce papers, seek meetings. And I personally love the sessions because it helps keep me informed and CEP informed to what the latest research is, what the latest reports are. The analysis of such reports is extremely beneficial. But I might just ask Tina King, what do you think the benefits and advantages are of the 5 organisations actually forming an alliance as such?
If I go back, I think it was August 2022 when the 5 of us sat in a room, because, we have a crisis that is hitting leadership. It's hitting the profession by and large, but certainly school leaders are walking away from their jobs. The demands, the expectations, the workload pressures, the burnouts. And we all engage separately with key representatives of the department and the Minister's office. And we all sing the same song. We raise similar concerns, we advocate and, requesting change. And if we go back to the occupational health and wellbeing survey, the Phil Riley stuff, one of the recommendations from that survey back in 2020 was for one united voice, because collectively it's much more powerful. And that's exactly what we have done. So the 5 of us sat in that room and we gave a commitment to collectively bring to the department and to the Minister's office the challenges that are faced by school leaders, irrespective of where they may be located, and the need for immediate and warranted change. So we've had, well, I think we've had some real success and some great change as a result of that. The announcements that have come in relation to the independent inquiry are a direct result of the work that we did collectively as part of the Education Summit last year, no, the year before. And the recommendations that were put in that paper, that was direct feedback from participants where we asked, what are the enablers and the barriers to you doing your job as a school leader? And we got some fantastic feedback that we were able to present to then Minister. And when we went in there as a unified alliance, and we've specifically asked for no department people in the room, because we wanted the Minister to hear from us what our principals and leaders were saying. And she listened attentively, and that was quite groundbreaking. As I said before, it's much more powerful. I mean, I have these conversations with the Minister and the Secretary, as does Andrew and Colin and Cam, who's on the screen, and as you do, Mark. But you know, when you're doing it individually, it's easy to hear the same song, but it doesn't make as much noise. So certainly, I think my colleagues will agree that in really seeking for sustainable change to make this job enduring and satisfying, we need changes. And the best way to get that is through the alliance that we have formed. I invite Alan, Andrew, Colin, anyone else, Cam, if you want to add anything to that, please go for it. But that basically sums up the commitment we've given to our respective membership, to act as one and create one voice, because the issues are the same.
I think it's very much collectively we're stronger together than being able to go individually, and that's where the power has come, that we've got strong agreement around what needs to occur to support our leaders right across the state.
Thank you, Tina, and thank you, Andrew. We might put a challenge out to those who are viewing in the chat group. Feel free. This Alliance of 5 don't have a name. We tried a few. Famous 5 sounded a bit corny. The firm sounded a bit sinister. So if you think of some fantastic name, be aware of what acronym it might form. We would welcome anything in the chat, and always up for some humour. I can see Melissa Weir's mind ticking over as we go. So feel free to pop them in the chat. That's a slightly different tangent to our sessions that we normally do. So we've got a couple of questions, and what we'll do is we'll get sort of everyone's response. So one of the key areas that this Alliance of 5 have been addressing and raising is around principal workload. And just that question of, you know, what are some of the ways that we can address workload, both at an organisation advocacy level, but also at an individual level in a school? Is there any advice that we could perhaps give to our leaders around that self-care aspect of it? So that's really broad, and I think all the individuals could probably talk for 20 minutes on that, but happy to hear. Who'd like to go first?
Oh, I'll jump in, and I promise I won't speak for 20 minutes. I really do. Look, I think I'm going to be a bit heretical and actually start the discussion about how we reduce principal workload by actually posing a question about and asking principals what they're prepared to give up. So, and it's not about preparing to give up particular jobs, it's about preparing to accept the fact that your autonomy, you know, that fabulous and incredibly nebulous and vague word of principal or term of principal autonomy, because the reality is we can talk about reducing an administrative and compliance workload, and we can work with Cuddy Roberts-Hull, who is doing that review into administrative and compliance workload in schools. But, and it was a discussion we had at that summit at the beginning of last year, that it's like, if you want to reduce workload, it may in fact mean that you will give up some autonomy. And so, I mean, the example I would give, if you turn around and say, I'm actually just sick of trying to keep and maintain the buildings of the school. It's just taking up too much time. I want somebody from the department to come along and look after it for me. And the reality is, the minute you do that, you will lose the flexibility to do with those spaces within your school that you have in the past. So the example I give is turning that spare classroom into the well-being room, and you know, and modifying it and so forth, because you're changing, if you like, the fabric of that particular room. So it comes down to a question of you know, not only what you want to get rid of to make your job easier, and so you can focus on actually being an educational leader, but what you're prepared to give up at the same time. And the two have to be connected, because we can't say, but I want to maintain 100% autonomy, but I don't want all the work that's attached to it. It's like, sorry, we don't live in a fairy tale garden where we get to have everything that we want, and no workload attached. And that, I think, is going to be the most difficult thing for us as principals, to actually come to some kind of agreement. The positive is, I think we're now the quintessential quintet, according to Tyron. There you go. It's not a wasted education on you at all, Tyron. Well done. You've got a job as a marketing agent if you don't want to work for the academy anymore. So I think the positive is that we are collectively, we're all heading in the same direction. And while we might occasionally have the slight differences of our environments, whether, you know, I talk from a secondary perspective, Andrew from that primary perspective, Cam from the special school perspective, and then general come in with a little bit of industrial, and Mark reminds us about the rural, although I will shout out that both Andrew and I have been principals in country schools. So we're not completely oblivious to what happens out in rural Victoria, but I think it's really important to keep those things in mind. There you go, Mark.
Thanks, Colin.
Can I just,
Tina?
yeah, can I pick up from where Colin made some key points? It's an interesting, what do we give up, or what supports do we have, be they human supports or financial supports, to be able to maintain that autonomy but receive that on the ground support. So, for example, you know, let's take the issues of, you all receive technical support in your schools, because it's recognised by the department that to maintain your computers, etc., requires a certain level of skill set and expertise. Well, why can't you have building managers similarly, access building or facilities managers, that can do all those legislative requirements about what your exit light should look like, and, you know, sign off on all those things. So I think we need more of an approach that looks at how do you decentralise those supports and resources so that they are received at the ground level by schools, rather than having to contact regional, central. And when you do that, you normally just are referred to a web page or a checklist or something like that. So what we're hearing from principals all the time is, in helping me with my work, allow me direct access to that expertise, that knowledge, that skill set that will allow me to do my job. The other approach the department's taking at the moment, and from where we sit as an organisation, I have real concern and about what this looks like, particularly in our remote and small size schools, is the workforce planning, and where they're looking at your staffing profile and they're saying, to deal with workload, increase the leadership profile within your school so that you can distribute the workload. two issues with that. One, it doesn't deal with the workload demands that come down the pipeline. All it's saying is they're going to keep coming, but, you know, spread them across your school. And how does that look like when you're a teaching principal? Who do you allocate that to if you don't have that personnel and that support? And when we have these discussions with the department, you know, it's always a case of, yeah, it's really hard in small schools. Well, stop putting small schools in the too hard basket, because it's not hard if you stop thinking it's hard. You can't treat all schools the same, because whilst the job and the intent is the same, the context is different. So you can't have the one size fits all approach and hope you're going to deal with most of you know, address most of the schools. So in dealing with workload, I agree with you, Colin, something may have to give, like essential safety measures have become centralised, but that's not a solution, because I'm hearing from principal with the essential safety measures, for example, they've taken it off us, the VSBA is dealing with it, and I've still got work to do around it. So one of the things we're advocating for is more on the ground support for schools, not at regions, not at centrals, but the expertise and the personnel for schools to have direct access to.
Thanks, Tina. Andrew?
Thanks, Mark, and certainly agree with all of that. I mean, one of the things that I've spoken about for a while is looking at, you know, an operations manager and how that can work, and certainly picking up facilities maintenance, OH&S, but what are we prepared to let go is a big part of that. The other side is, how do we work more effectively as clusters? Certainly know through rural experience, clusters are quite strong in many cases. Quite often they're driven by the individuals, but how do we get a strong cluster support in that? The other challenge that sits there, though, as we know, is we add more staff in, someone has to manage those people. And that can inadvertently add to workload for school leaders as well. You know, I had a network meeting with 60 odd Prins in Box Hill this morning and was talking about similar there. And, you know, some stood up and said, oh, but I don't want to lose my autonomy. Again, as Colin said, we actually need to be prepared to lose some of that, but we need to be strong in what is it that we need autonomy over. And certainly be able to take that lead, whereas we shouldn't be managing the facilities, the maintenance at that finite level that we tend to do at a primary school level particularly, but even secondary schools when we look at some of our rural schools as well. You know, getting someone who has the expertise, the trade knowledge to be able to do the work, not just give us a checklist of things to do, but to be able to actively take that work off our desk.
Andrew, can I just, operations manager, just for the sake of everybody here, we costed that. If each school was to have access, not full time, just pro rata according to size, an operation manager, we estimated a cost probably around $95 million. Now, if the department can find, or I should say, government can find $75 million for fishing rods, they can find $95 million to support.
Correct.
Thanks, Tina and Andrew. Cam, anything to add?
No, well, I suppose the only thing for me to add to that is, and I suppose it's a little bit around this collective voice as well, is that there's some wonderful initiatives that do come out, but I think there's some big pieces that need additional consultation on. That's a lot of it's around that implementation as well, and you know, that it doesn't look the same in every school. So there's a lot of work, I think, for us to do as a collective to keep pushing up to the department to say, look, you can't just have these tacit ways of, or blanket ways of just rolling this stuff out. And as a principal in a rural regional school as well, you know, I don't have an assistant principal. I'm maxed out with my SRP, with whatever leadership I have. I still find myself in the classrooms. I find myself driving buses for camps and all of that stuff as well. And when you do continue to have this top-down approach, you know, what are you here for? You're here for the kids, and a lot of that compliance stuff just has to keep getting pushed to the side because it's not our priority. And I always wonder where I feel like personally that I'm losing grip on being a strong educational leader because of all this other stuff. So I think the more opportunity we have to, and it is a double-edged sword with around that losing autonomy and, gaining staff that you then have to manage on top of that. As a P to 12, I've got, the MHP and the MHWL. As a special school, I now have defined an NDIS navigator and, all these things that got to keep on top of. But everything's sort of taking away from your core business. And, as much as I completely agree with Tina, we're not just a head teacher. I still consider myself not much but a teacher. I came through as an educator. I want to see kids learn. That should be my priority. So I think that there's that challenge to find that balance of when do we have that shift from administrator or to administrator, from teacher to manager, and all that as well. It's a complex role. I don't think we have any answers, but I think we do need to keep pushing to enable everybody to do the job to the best of their capacity.
Thanks, Cam. And from CEP's perspective, probably just a couple to add, and Andrew stole the thunder a little bit there. There's opportunities around clusters of schools to look at, to combine resources to put roles, whether it be an OHS coordinator or facilities or a program manager if there's some building works. But I feel like they need the support once you've got a group of schools who've expressed an interest to actually get someone to put together a role description, put together a workforce plan, all those things. I think with that regional office support could get more of those situations. I think schools have intentions to, would like to do that, but it's just another thing that they have to do and manage, and often it just falls by the wayside. So, and the other thing specific to rural schools is those random rare events that suddenly hit a small school, like a work cover claim, a dispute, serious complaint, something they've never had to deal with before. So those sort of things to give some support to. And I think that what we were saying to principals is use your collegiate network as much as you can when you do get, as well as organisations here, but when you do get circumstances that you've never had to experience before, don't feel like you have to figure it out on your own because someone somewhere else has had to go through it. Brendan, you've got just a few years experience in education. Have you got a question for anyone or something you'd like to add?
Interestingly, your comment there regarding dealing with issues, one of my greatest concerns relates to the lack of timeliness in dealing with issues from a department point of view. The fact that it gets drawn out over months and months, and that of course places enormous pressure on the principals. And my feeling is that particularly at the regional level, there's now a focus on accountability, relentless focus on accountability, and I think the department has dropped the ball in terms of welfare support and providing that direct hands-on welfare support to principals. And I'd be interested in hearing from the associations whether you have the same feeling or not. And I think a number of you would have read the article in this morning's Age, a very important article in my opinion, and they raised the issue of morale injury. And I'm wondering whether that's also a focus for the associations at the moment, whether there's something going to be addressed in terms of that issue.
Thanks, Brendan. Apologies, Colin, you had your hand up before.
Oh, that's okay, Mark. Brendan, you're right. It hasn't got any better since you left your full-time job, and if anything, it's got worse. And that's the reality. I personally don't see that the department is there to support principals. I think they're there to hold them accountable. And look, and it's a gross generalisation. There are some exceptional SEALs out there and AEDs who are looking after their principals, but they're not the majority of the stories we hear. And this kind of segues a bit into, and I was just responding, Mark, to the question in the chat from Catherine Barnes. Name that sounds very familiar. around, you know, the longevity and the sustainability of the role of not only, I think, teaching principals, but principals full stop, is we actually have to look at alternatives. We have to look at how we're running our education system. It's something we raised again to the committee today, that we're often trying to solve problems for a system that's no longer fit for purpose. And maybe we need to have a conversation about what should our schools look like? What actually are our schools? What's the purpose of schools? And then start to solve that problem once we've determined that. Because I think it was very apparent in some of the responses today we got from the committee members, the politicians. I don't think you ask anybody outside of a school to explain what the role of a school is, they can't give you a clear answer. And that's a real problem. Because if the community can't tell you actually what the role of a school is, then and also codify or articulate their expectations, then it makes it very hard for us to be able to do our jobs.
Thanks, Colin. I've got one final question that I think we're only going to have time to direct it at Tina, being from the industrial body, but also want to give everyone the opportunity at the end to give a plug to any events that they've got coming up. So we certainly love to hear from there. Before I pass to you, Tina, Colin, you just reminded me of a comment from one of CEP's live members, Wendy Graham, who many might know. She's got a famous statement. She said, if aliens came back to Earth from 80 years ago and saw how everything had changed, the one things that actually haven't changed that much would be schools. Was always an interesting thought compared to lots of other things. So, Tina, just to you quickly, and I know we probably debated about whether we would put this question out there, but can be a bit controversial, but being from the industrial arm, we'll give it to you. This is the final year of the workplace agreement. What sort of aspects of the current agreement you think have created the biggest challenge, and are you hearing some alternatives or possible additions that would be well suited into future agreements? So hope that's not putting you too much on the spot, and we may get time to hear from a couple others.
Thanks, Mark. And it's three words that are causing the biggest pressure points at the moment. It's called time in lieu, acquittal of time in lieu. It centres around, a lot of people are referring to this agreement as the culture killer agreement in schools. Now, let's not debate the fact that anyone that works beyond the 38 hours should be compensated for that, be it through monetary or time. And that's everyone. So principals and APs should be accruing time in lieu as well. We know what the problem with that will be, because principals work anywhere up to 60 hours a week, but that's the reality of the job. That is the expectation. So unless something gives, one of the things we'll be going for with the next agreement is time in lieu for principals and APs. One of the suggestions that has come through for PIN and APs is the opportunity to acquit through being able to convert it to long service leave credits. So instead of getting paid for the additional time, having the option to have it translate over to accrued long service leave. The other aspect around time in lieu relates to management of teacher time in lieu and how you acquit that through time. And robbing an hour from here to pay an hour there, it's just not doable in schools, particularly for the big items that accrue lots of time in lieu, like camps. And, you know, secondary schools have overseas learning experiences. So we are really hearing strongly that that needs to be acquitted through remuneration, through payment. You do have payment for the overnight component of camp, but that falls well short of how much time is actually accrued. The other pressure point around the agreement is the management of teacher work, the 30 and the 8-hour model. And in the 30 hours, in that non-face-to-face contact time, the teacher determines what work they want to undertake. So if you want teachers to engage in collaborative planning during that non-face-to-face time, They don't have to if they don't want to. So some schools are really struggling with when they're going to fit in their PLC opportunities to meet collaborative planning, collaborative assessments, and so on. So that wording in there that says to be determined by the teacher, we really want to see that changed to in consultation with the principal. In terms of remuneration going into this agreement, well, nurses knocked back 23%, police around 24%. So don't think 2% each year is going to cut it in this agreement. So, look, that's a really quick snapshot. I'm happy for people to put things in the chat. And if you Google me, I come up online. So you're welcome to contact me directly because I know we're limited on time. But I'm just talking about the main things that have come up through our engagement with members. But yeah, we don't want people doing work out of goodwill the whole time. But what are the 6 weeks term breaks for? What how does that tie in with time in lieu? These are all fair questions. And you may be the manager and the department may say you can acquit a time in lieu for yourself, but where's that written in the agreement? It's not. There's too much grey in this agreement that certainly needs clearing up.
Thank you, Tina. And I'm sure if we had more time, the others would certainly, they're probably itching at their desks to have some input in there. So thank you. We'll just quickly go around the group. If you did want to make a quick comment, but also if you have an event coming up that's still open for registrations or interest this year that you'd like to plug, happy to do that. So over to you, Colin, first.
Yep. The main thing we want to plug would be our conference in August, 15th and 16th of August. It's on our website, vasp.org.au. Takes you to the link. The 15th and 16th of Thursday, Friday. We could probably even tell you what the AFL fixtures are for the Friday night. Guaranteed to be a game at either the MCG or Marvel Stadium. And we're doing it at Ridges Hotel in the city, so near the theatre district. So for those of you who want culture with a C as opposed to culture with a K, we could probably tell you what shows to go to as well. But our lineup's there, and our theme is actually around the sustainability of school leadership.
Thank you, Colin. Andrew.
Thanks, Mark. And yeah, we certainly have our conference coming up as well. When I talk culture, it's probably more yogurt than the sort of culture you're talking, Colin. But 22nd, 23rd of August at Crown this year at the Crown Promenade. Our early birds close I think early next month. We do have a number of small school scholarships which have been announced. Again, trying to make it easier to encourage our smaller schools to come in. We're certainly looking around the 300 mark and trying to grow that. Our conference theme this year is leadership, your schools, your community. So it's reflecting the work that you do within your communities in leadership as well. We also have a presidents and boards drinks on the Wednesday evening as well, if you're interested in doing that, and very much around your professional learning, your professional well-being, opportunity to come in and share both joy and the challenges of school leadership as well. So I encourage you to register if you haven't already done so.
Thank you, Cam.
We had our main conference 2 weeks ago, so that was the big one. It was a very successful one up over in Echuca, Moama, so that was fantastic. We have about 13, 14 face-to-face opportunities for our members throughout the year, so we think we're really fortunate to be able to do that. Our next main one, aside from our forums, where we have department representatives come in and talk about whatever's topical at that point in time, and next one would be our awards night, which we do later in the year around in term 4. So yeah, that'll be our next big event. So keep your eye out for all the publicity around that.
Thanks, Cam. Tina.
We have a seminar, an online seminar next Thursday, not tomorrow week, on the 20th of June. It's gone out to all our members around the EBA. So if anyone wants to attend that, just shoot me an email and I'll send you the link details. So I'll extend an invitation to anyone here. You're more than welcome. And we have our big days on the 18th of October, which is our AGM and seminar. So that's in the city. It is a Friday. So for our regional colleagues, there's accommodation at the Rendezvous Hotel and anyone who wants to stay on and play over the weekend.
Thank you, Tina. And CEP has their Small Schools Forum next week. We've just passed the 150 registration mark with still over a week to go. So it's a hybrid model across the state. So we're really excited. Thank you to all our presidents for giving up their time today. Up now, we have the inaugural manager for the Humans Murray Country University Centre, Mark van Bergen, who's going to talk to us. And a couple of things I'd probably like to know, Mark. I'm not sure if I'm putting you on the spot here, but I'd be certainly interested in what service the CUCs play, but also whether there's any talk of expanding them beyond their current Victorian locations. So a couple of questions for you, but we'll hand over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, for the opportunity to talk again at a CEP thing. It's been a few years. Country University Centres is a predominantly federally funded regional university study hub. So I manage the centres in Wangaratta, Corryong and Mansfield. But there's 46 now that the federal government has funded across the nation. So I might start my presentation and talk about it, but in essence, we are a facility in regional areas that supports any student studying any course through any institution. That can be Faith University, and I'll go through some of our data, but we basically exist from an equity point of view, trying to support people in regional areas with their gaining of further qualifications. So I'll just share my screen two. All right, hopefully you can see that presentation.
We can.
Okay, so the federal government has just rolled out another 12 centres. So of the 46 that you see on your map there, 35 of them are currently operational. And in Victoria, you can see there's one in Swan Hill that opened earlier this year. And there's a CUC down in Bass Coast, Wonthaggi. And then East Gippsland Study Hub is not a CUC, but it's a federally funded regional university centre. CUCs are affiliated, as in there are 18 with 22 coming online, as you can see across the eastern seaboard. So we work together to address some of the barriers that regional people face. It all started in Coomera in 2013, and the key with the country university centres is that it's a local board that run it, and it's about local solutions to higher ed. It's not about universities or governments coming into communities. It's community-led and driven, and started in Coomera in 2013, where the council and Snowy Hydro were seeing lots of young people leave their area, or they couldn't attract people or upskill them, and so they invested in this centre, and they basically ran from 2013 to 2018, providing the supports that we offer. So we offer high-speed internet that's reliable, a quiet, dedicated study space. So rather than doing it at home on kitchen table with all the distractions, dual screen computers, free printing, and other students. That's a key thing too. So if you're studying online, it can be quite isolating, whereas when you're sort of in a common space, yeah, it certainly takes away that isolation. And so basically for 5 years it ran, the federal government saw, here's a really cost-effective way that we can support regional people in gaining qualifications. And so in 2018, they rolled out a few more, and you can sort of see from this New South Wales map that they put them in areas where there is the percentage of the population that have a bachelor degree. You can see in certainly in areas of Sydney, you know, it's nearly 1 in 2 people, and so they put these centres in, you know, Broken Hill, Griffith, Grafton, and so forth. So in Victoria, same sort of map. You know, you get off at Southern Cross Station, and every second person, you know, from the age of 25 to 35 has a bachelor degree. Head up the V-line track to Wangaratta, and well, this is a little dated. It was 14%, it's now 17%. Similar to Corryong, 11%, and Mansfield. And so, and of course, Swan Hill up in the Mallee there, similar sort of story. In regional qualifications nationwide, so if you look at percentage of population with a bachelor degree or higher, major cities punching, you know, nearly 1 in 2. Regional, rural and remote, the average 24.4, and it actually doesn't make much difference whether that's regional, remote, it's kind of the same. And when you look back at the Wangaratta and Towong Shire and Mansfield sort of areas, or Swan Hill or Wonthaggi, when it's below the regional or remote average, it's like, well, what can we do? And so you can see here in 2021, the census data, you can see that the in the rural city of Wangaratta, you know, we do quite well for vocational, but when it comes to bachelor or higher degrees, we're behind the rest of Victoria. You then start putting in some multiplying effects of being regional. So if you're regional a little bit older, if you're doing it part-time, if you're sort of trying to upskill and those type of things, the attrition rate becomes greater and greater the further you add these multiplying factors. And that's where we kind of step in, as we try and overcome some of those sorts of things. So students in regional areas, and you don't need to tell many of the people here that, you know, a lot of them to access, it's either go to a city or you're doing it online. Quite often that's part-time. There's low socio-economic, quite a lot of first in family. So just even navigating what university is about is an issue. And also, you know, quite often ATARs are lower, and so access to some of those opportunities are inhibited as well. Federal government, both persuasions have been spending billions of dollars on trying to improve equity in higher ed, and really the dial hasn't shifted much. And you would have maybe heard the Universities Accord in the news, and that's where the, you know, funding of more of these regional study hubs has come from. So regional towns, quite often too small to have a university. Internet, if you're out at Cheshunt where I am, pretty ordinary. Unsure where to find help, isolation, all those factors. And at the moment, we've got exams that we're supervising. So quiet space, all those type of things. So these are the solutions that we offer. 5 a.m. to midnight, 7 days a week, exam spaces, free printing, dedicated study. And the key part is we offer in-person support. So I've got a session booked in tomorrow to help a first year student with referencing, you know, just to have that in person. Let's have a look, let's have a talk. And so we exist to support those equity sort of issues. The universities are still key.
I'll give you a 1 minute warning, Mark, sorry.
1 minute warning, yep.
Yeah.
So we've got 177 students this semester, 50 different institutions, 24 different unis. Many are the first in their family to study, 44%. We're actually working with schools in supporting some of those kids doing Centre for Higher Education Studies, as well as year 12s who are doing first year university subjects. So supporting students is one aspect. The other side is changing the dial for bachelor attainment. So we're currently doing a project with RMIT and La Trobe, and we're getting into some primary schools and high schools in our patch to start talking about higher education, careers, opening up pathways, and consulting and working with the community, and we're co-designing it with them. So we've been co-designing with schools, and we've been piloting some of these activities to try and shift that dial when it comes to understanding university take, what the opportunities and pathways are for regional people, because it's changed over those years. So thanks for the opportunity to talk, Mark.
Thank you, Mark, and I appreciate turning a 15-minute presentation into 7.5. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, no worries.
We do stick to time here. I know Brendan wants to promote the session next week. And I'll pass back to him for the final thank yous to everyone and promote next week and finish up.
Thanks very much, Mark. Yes, can I also thank everybody for the participation and presentation this afternoon. I just remind everybody that the session has been recorded, so you can go back and have a look at the session again. And the survey, which we asked you to complete, is on included in the chat box. So please fill out the survey before you sign off. And as Mark said, our third session next Wednesday afternoon has a focus on AI in education, which has been a significant topic in the media over recent days. There'll also be a presentation concerning EcoLink and what's available as far as STEM opportunities in the education system at the moment. So very important session, and would encourage people to register for our third session next Wednesday. Thanks everybody for your participation today. Sign off now. Bye for now.